Hello everyone, welcome back to another video on my channel. Today I wanted to do a video kind of discussing my thoughts on the managerial situation at Spurs. On Tuesday, it will be 50 days since Spurs last had a permanent manager in charge, and it still feels as though we're no closer to getting one. So obviously it's a very frustrating time to be a Spurs fan, and I kind of wanted to give my thoughts on the whole situation. Now, of course, firstly, the Antonio Conte situation was very, very frustrating. On Wednesday and Thursday, it looked as though Spurs were very confident of getting a deal done. But then as of Friday, the deal was completely called off. Both sides kind of walking away from a deal as it was being reported in Italy and England. So very, very frustrating. I think firstly, the biggest frustration is that a manager like Antonio Conte, a guy who just won the title with Inter Milan, their first title in 11 years, was willing to speak to Spurs and was really keen on the job. Now he's Fabrizio Romano, obviously a fantastic journalist from Italy, did a video with Chris Cowlin today, and he was kind of going through the situation, and he was making it very clear that Conte was very keen to come to Spurs, and that's frustrating that a manager like that sees the club, sees the potential that we have, and we're not looking to build on that. I think that's the biggest frustration from this situation. I think it also shows kind of where the ambitions of the owners are. I think with Antonio Conte, he's a guy who wins trophies. As I said, he's one of the top managers in the world. He wants to come and rebuild this. He said, as Fabrizio Romano said, he wanted to come in, rebuild this team and help Spurs win like he did at Inter and Juventus. Juventus, when he took over, were a team that were really struggling. He takes them on to win league titles. Inter, team that had been struggling for years, wins their first league title, as I said, in 10 years. And at Spurs, he wanted to do the same. But unfortunately, Spurs weren't willing to give him what he wanted. They had the perfect opportunity to go and get one of the best managers in the world, and unfortunately, they rejected that. So I think that's the biggest frustration for me. It kind of shows where Spurs' ambitions do lie. They had the opportunity in the palm of the hand and they've turned it down. So that's a huge frustration for Spurs. And then you look where we're going to turn elsewhere now. You're just very concerning where we might look to turn if we're not willing to go for a manager like Conte. One thing that also very much strikes me about this whole situation is we're trying to pretend to be a club that we're actually willing to be. Of course, as we've been linked with, Antonio Conte, Mauricio Pochettino. We've gone really hard for them over the last week or so, and we failed to get both of them. We failed to kind of give them both of the demands that they wanted. Of course, towards the end of Mauricio Pochettino's reign, he wanted more control. And then, of course, towards the end, he was let go. Antonio Conte, a manager who we know is going to be very demanding. He's a world-class manager. He can go and demand, he wants to demand stuff. He's a very, very highly demanding manager. We weren't willing to give him what he wanted. And so it looks like we're trying to chase the wrong profile of manager. For me, I think we're a club that thinks we want a Conte or a Poch, but really we're trying to chase a manager like Graham Potter or an Eddie Howe, who's able to work with what they've got and will kind of bow into the demands of the owners of the club. And that's sort of what it feels like. It feels like a bit of a waste of time at the moment, going for these top-level managers, when in reality, that's not actually what we want. We speak about, that there's obviously a lot mentioned about the DNA of the club and trying to find a manager that's going to fit the DNA of the club. Well, the DNA of the club, I think, is just a nice thing. I think that they say it's Spurs playing nice football, bringing through young players, when in reality, the DNA is set by the people at the top of the club. And I think that Spurs' DNA is by having managers in place that are willing to just work with a very limited budget, that are really willing, that having to work under real constraints. And that's what we're chasing. So for me, I'm really worried when they say we're looking for a manager of Spurs' DNA, because as I said, I think Spurs' DNA is working under real limitations and really being limited by the people who are running the club. So that again for me is a big worry for Spurs. I think we're chasing the wrong type of manager. As we said, we want to be in the Super League. We want to be chasing for the Champions League, but we're not a club that's willing to actually go and do that. We're not going to willing to go and invest on the pitch, willing to make the right decisions to go and get us back into the Champions League. And that for me is really disappointing and really worrying for finding our next manager. I think the other major concern that I have, of course, we know Antonio Conte, one of the reasons that deal would have fallen through is because of the demands in terms of being able to go and revitalise the team. Now this team is in desperate need of being revitalised. We saw towards the end of last season the absolute disaster that this team is, and how much it needs to be refreshed. And any manager that comes in needs to be given real funds to go and revitalise this team. So that's a big concern, that we've got a fantastic manager that wants to come and manage us and rebuild this team, but we're not willing to give him that control. So that to me suggests that any manager coming in is going to be working under real constraints into how much he's going to be given in order to go and rebuild the team. So that's definitely a concern for me. If we're not willing to go and back one of the biggest managers in the world, then I don't think we're willing to back any manager in terms of rebuilding the squad how it needs to be done. Mauricio Pochettino, of course, he warned us about this a long time ago, a couple of years ago. We've never rebuilt this squad. We've just stuck with what we've got. We've asked the managers to work with what they've got. But now it needs to change. Otherwise, next season, we're going to be in a real mess again. The last 2 years have felt absolutely wasted. And they have been. Maybe Fabio Patrici coming in from Juve, the former Juve sporting director, coming in as our new sporting director is a step in the right direction. But I think that it's very concerning the kind of the constraints that he'll be working under. So that is another very big concern for me. Now, another point that I wanted to make was just in terms of the mentality of the club. Of course, as I said, Spurs had the opportunity to go and appoint one of the best managers in the world. He was really interested in coming to the club, and we opted to turn him down. For me, I think if you talk about kind of the mentality of the club, people spoke about Jose Mourinho coming to the club and creating a winning mentality at the club. I think Antonio Conte was tipped to come in and bring that winning mentality to Spurs, but that was never going to be the case. The manager is not the one that kind of sets that winning mentality at the club. Spurs were always labelled as this club that are bottlers. But ultimately, the mentality of the club is set by the people who run it. I think Chelsea are a fantastic example of a club that have that winning mentality because they have owners that want to win, that have that are just totally fixated on winning. You see the way they treat the managers. Frank Lampard, as soon as he was failing, he was out the door, and they've got a new manager in who they felt would go and deliver trophies. And even in a difficult season, they've managed to go and win the European Cup. So it just shows you that a club like Chelsea is a fantastic example of how the owners have created a winning mentality. At Spurs, we've shown the level of ambition by rejecting Antonio Conte. We've shown the level of ambition by going 3 or 4 transfer windows without making a signing. And we've shown on multiple occasions by the decisions that we made in the transfer market in terms of getting a new manager, going 50 days without getting a new manager, that we're a club that that doesn't have that real desire to win and really go and try and kick on, because we've not made those decisions. And that, for me, in terms of the mentality, I think that's a really key point to make. As I said, lots of people that claim we're bottlers, but for me, I think that mentality comes from the top, and that's something that desperately needs to change at Spurs. Now, just one final other point, and that is regarding Spurs' rivals as well. You see the planning that they've already got going on. You see Leicester bringing in Boubakary Samara from Lille. They're going to bring in Edouard from Celtic, fantastic striker. And then, of course, as I said, Samara, fantastic midfielder. They're 2 top signings for Leicester. They're already preparing for next season. They've already stolen a march on us, finished above us last season. And I think they'll go and do it again, because they're a club that's really going and backing their manager. They're already making plans, and we're getting left behind. Even Aston Villa, they're making plans for next season, bringing in Emi Buendia from Norwich City, a fantastic signing for them. One of the best players in the Championship last year, really stood out, and I think he's going to be a brilliant signing for them. And that's the sort of club that's now starting to steal a march on us. I think we continue to kind of we just don't seem like there's any plan at the club. There's no long-term vision. All these other clubs, they are Leicester, Aston Villa, all have long-term plans. There's a real kind of cohesion at the top. They're all pulling in the right direction. They know what the plan is. At Spurs, it feels all over the shop. We're, as I said, with the managerial situation, we're kind of, it feels like we are pursuing a type of manager that we feel is the right manager, but really it feels as though that's not really what the club are after. That's not, they want a manager who's willing to work for what they've got. So, as I said, I just feel as though we're really getting left behind. We're really at risk of getting left behind this year with clubs making big plans for next season. We haven't even got a manager in place. So that, for me, again, is another huge concern in terms of, will Spurs get left behind by their rivals? So, as I said, it's been 50 days, of course, 50 days since Spurs last had a permanent manager. They've had all that time to kind of go and sort it. Really, we felt as though last week would have been the week that we'd finally get that manager in. We still feel no closer. So, it's a situation that the club really need to sort out quickly, because it's really becoming a very embarrassing situation for Spurs. For the supporters, incredibly frustrating. We've all just renewed our season tickets, paid one of the highest prices in Europe, and that's totally fair. I think there's a huge waiting list of people preparing to pay that money, so you have to do it. But at the same time, it's incredibly disappointing to again see kind of the ambition of the club. It just doesn't seem to be there. I think that the Antonio Conte situation, as I said, I think it completely sums up where Spurs' ambitions lie. They had the opportunity to get a top manager and they're not willing to get it. So I do worry about the managerial situation, but hopefully we can have that somewhat sorted out in the next week. It needs to really become clear, because for supporters, it's becoming very frustrating. We're seeing our rivals all making moves. So yeah, frustrating situation. That's all I've got to say on this video. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you did like it, please subscribe to my channel. And as always, come on you Spurs.